The Bible is unreliable, it's not historically accurate, nor was it written by any eyewitnesses. Now, this is a very common claim used by skeptics and even some proclaimed Christians alike. Now, this is usually because the evidence isn't widely known, therefore it's not being widely taught. While it would be impossible for me to teach on the historical reliability of the entire Bible, I decided to go to the core of the Christian faith, the Gospels. Now, the Gospels recount the life and the mission of the historical Jesus. Now, outside of my schoolwork and my job duties, one of the most fascinating topics to me is Christian apologetics. And not just that, but can we trust the text that we have today? As a quick Bible lesson, there are 4 Gospels: the Gospel of Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John. Now, Matthew, Mark, and Luke cover very similar topics in very similar content. Therefore, they're grouped together in something called the Synoptic Gospels. That leaves John as the outlier, most subject to criticism, and this is what I will be touching on today. Now, why is this relevant to you? Well, according to the Princeton Review, 43% of Auburn students are self-proclaimed Christians. Therefore, through literary evidence, archaeological evidence, and paleographic evidence, I will be explaining why the Gospel of John is historically reliable. First things first, who wrote it and how do we know who wrote it? Well, according to St. Irenaeus in 180 CE, he claims that John the Apostle was the one who wrote the Gospel of John while living in Ephesus. Now, why is this guy important? Well, first things first, Irenaeus was a student of Polycarp, and Polycarp was a student of the Apostle John. Now, that's only 2 degrees of difference between the original authorship. That in and of itself is pretty damning evidence. Not just that, but Christogenix in the Journal for the Study of the New Testament states that uniquely among the Gospels, John steps out of the narrative and speaks in the first person to the reader. This is something that is a literary fingerprint for an eyewitness account. Our only clue to this is in John chapter 21, where he says that the beloved disciple is the one who recounts these things. Now, our job is to see who is this beloved disciple. Well, referring to the other Gospels and cross-referencing those, we know that the beloved disciple had to do 3 things. Number 1, it had to be present at the Last Supper, it had to be present at the crucifixion, and it had to be present at the resurrection. Among other things, John the Apostle was the only one to fit this criteria. Therefore, we can say that John the Apostle is most likely the author of the Gospel of John. Now, that's only literary evidence. What about archaeological evidence? Well, in 2004, following a broken sewage pipe, construction workers uncovered an archaeological gold mine to bolster the reliability of the Gospel of John. All these specific details, like the 153 fish mentioned in the Gospel of John, are used by John all the time. Something that's also oddly specific is in John 9, when John records Jesus telling the blind man to go bathe in the pool of Siloam. Now, most skeptics argued that this was either made up or maybe even symbolic. There was no way to prove this because in 70 CE, the Romans totally destroyed Jerusalem, leaving it in complete rubble. Therefore, there was no way to determine if the Pool of Siloam was accurately recorded by the writer of John. But in 2004, following the sewage pipe construction workers finding the actual Pool of Siloam, we can find archaeological evidence for the fact that John is accurately recounting these things. Not just that, but Stan in his article, Ritual Purification and Bathing, states that the architectural layout itself suggests not only just a purely recreational purpose, but a ceremonial purpose. Exactly what John recounted. Therefore, not only did the writer of the Gospel of John accurately record the geographic location, but he also recorded the ceremonial purpose totally correctly. Now, that was literary evidence and archaeological evidence, but what about paleographic evidence? Well, in 1920, Mr. Bernard Grenfell uncovered a small piece of papyrus paper in Egypt, stored it in the John Rylands Museum for a couple years before being examined a few years later. Now, according to Nongbri, in Paleography, Precision, and Publicity, that this P52 fragment is not only the earliest piece of evidence we have in the entire New Testament and in the book of John, but it's the earliest fragment we have for the entire New Testament. Now, this fragment was sent to 3 papyrologists. All 3 of them independently determined that this piece of paper, or papyrus paper, was dated back to 100 to 150 CE. Now, what is even on this fragment? And back to our question, how do we even know what we're reading today is what was originally written? Well, following an examination of this P52 fragment, we find that it has writing from the 18th chapter of John. And that's significant because this translation is exactly what we read today. Therefore, there was no alteration from all the way back to 100 to 150 CE to what we have today. Therefore, according to literary evidence, archaeological evidence, and paleographic evidence, we can assume that the Gospel of John is historically reliable.